Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Oregon City Council for March 25th of 2024. If you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first item for business for us tonight will be a roll call of council. Ms. Rawson, would you please take a roll call of members of council?
Mrs. Ackerman. Here. Mr. Drake.
Here.
Mr. Horniak.
Here.
Mrs. Paula. Here. Mr. Reeves.
Here.
Mr. Salander.
Here.
Mr. Wallensack.
Here. Thank you. Please note that for the record that all members of council are here. Additionally, with us this evening is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and our Finance Director Nick Roman. Folks, we're going to have just a little change into the order this evening, and I believe I've spoken to everybody who has signed in to speak this evening. It appears that everybody is here to talk about one topic. So we will start with the agenda items. We will bring the public participation for those that wish to address that issue and speak to it right before we call that issue. So as we have the presentation information, we'll bring you in to speak to that. That way it'll be relevant to that agenda item as we'll be talking to it. Okay? So the first item of business for us this evening is to approve the minutes from the March 11th, 2024 regular council meeting. Council, I'd seek a motion.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. I move for approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2024 from our regular council meeting as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake to approve the meeting minutes for the March 11th, 2024 meeting as presented. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
administratively, I just want to state that all the items we presented last week, we have no additions to them. If there's any questions, of course, we'll be here to answer them, but we'll stand pat on our presentation last week.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Council, we do have a few items that need to be added to this evening's agenda. These are all items that I spoke with members of the administration about late last week to add them into that. The first one presented, I'll say, by the fire department. The second from our law director, which is our aggregation agreement. And the third being our roads plan for 2024, which came in earlier and was ready prior or before we thought it was going to be. So it seemed prudent to act on that this evening. So I would seek a motion to add item 59, 60, and 61 to this evening's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pauloff. We have a motion from Mr. Reeves, a second by Mrs. Pauloff to move items 59, 60, and 61 of 2024 to this evening's agenda. Councilor, are there any objections? Hearing none, the items are added to this evening's agenda. To the mayor's point, most of these items outside of those last three we just added were discussed last week at the committee of the whole meeting. So as we present the items, I will ask for additional questions from members of council, which we would address at that time, and any presentation or information will be made with the new three items that were added this evening. And we'll start our agenda this evening with item 53 of 2024. And I would ask, is there anything additional to add from the administration on item 53?
None of the items.
Okay,
Except
very
for
good.
three.
Council, any questions on item 53 of 2024? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion, or I will assign item 53 of 2024 as ordinance 53 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a 2-year agreement with Stryker Sales Corporation, 1901 Romance Road Parkway, Portage, Michigan, in an amount of $51,929.60 for the purpose of the maintenance and repair of Stryker equipment and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rossen. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollock.
I move for passage of ordinance 53 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenzak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pollock, seconded by Mr. Wallenzak for ordinance 53 of 2024. Ms. Rossen, can you please call a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman. Yes. Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 53 of 2024 passes with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. We'll move on to item 54 of 2024. Council, are there any questions for the administration on item 54 of 2024? Hearing none, I will sign item 54 of 2024 as ordinance 54 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rossen to read it into the record.
Authorizing the City of Oregon Fire Department to adopt current rates for EMS transports and mileage and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rossen. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollock.
I move for passage of ordinance 54, 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wallenzak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pollock, a second by Mr. Wallenzak for ordinance 54 of 24. Ms. Rossen, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman. Yes. Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 54 of 2024 passes with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 55 of 2024. Council, any questions for the administration on item 55? Hearing none, I will sign item 55 as ordinance 55 and ask Ms. Rossen to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with Bays Inc., 7414 Ponderosa Road, Perrysburg, Ohio, in the amount of $25,000 for the purpose of building and installing an OSHA compliant stairway with guardrail and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rossen. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollock.
I move for passage of ordinance 55 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenzak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pollock, a second by Mr. Wallenzak for ordinance 55 of 2024. Ms. Rossen, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzak,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman. Yes. Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 55 of 2024 passes with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item on the agenda is item 56 of 2024. Council, are there any questions on item 56?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollock.
since this has is in regards to the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation, I did a lot of research this week, and I really want to point out for those that don't understand what the Oregon Economic Development Foundation is about. I went through and I found from, bear with me for 1 second, please. From a resolution of Resolution 237 of 1996 was a master plan set up by the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. And they had a great explanation of what the Economic Development Foundation is. And I will read you the introduction. The Oregon Economic Bay Regional Development Foundation, or OBREDF, was formed in 1993 after the City Council asked for Oregon Growth Corporation to develop a proposal for the establishment of an organization specifically dedicated to daily tasks of the economic development. Incorporated as a nonprofit organization in the state of Ohio, the foundation is a non-political, business-led venture that separates economic development efforts from political agendas. The foundation has support from the Oregon City Government, Oregon Growth Corporation, and the Chamber of Commerce. and this was dated, this was from 1993. The master, excuse me, the master plan from them was passed 7 yeas, 0 nays on December 23rd, 1996. President of council back then was Jim Seaman. So I will be referencing through that in a couple of minutes as we go to the next ordinance. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood what the job of the Oregon Economic Development Foundation is. When people sit there and tell me that it is not government's job to get into development, I agree with you 1,000,000%, which is why we have the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. And it was set up solely for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spalla. Council, any other comments or concerns or questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 56 of 2024 as ordinance 56 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Spalla.
I move for passage of ordinance 56 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Spalla. Second. Second by Mr. Wallensack. We have a motion by Ms. Spalla, second by Mr. Wallensack for ordinance 56 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? No. Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Salander?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 56 of 2024 passes with a vote of 6 yeas and 1 nay. Moving on to the next agenda item is item 57 of 2024, which I believe is what everybody is here to talk about. At this time, we'll open to our public participation. What I
Mr.
would,
President.
if I may, what I would say in advance of that is we do have several people here to speak. We know that there's a lot of interest and energy on both sides of this issue. What I will do, as I have done in many meetings before, we'll try to limit comments to 3 to 5 minutes so everybody has an opportunity to speak this evening. We'll ask nobody to come back up to the podium or to answer back to what somebody else may say or may want to add to that. Everybody will have their opportunity. When we finish that opportunity, it will be the next person's opportunity to speak. And I would just ask to remember that we are in a public business meeting, so I'd ask everybody just to conduct themselves accordingly, which I'm sure everybody will. The first person, I'm sorry, Mayor, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to make a presentation for this. If I
You want to
could,
present first?
Before an explanation of why this is here.
Okay.
And then we can speak to the item, but before people come up, so maybe I could answer some questions before they ask. And that is really, if I
That's
could.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go that route.
So the reason we have this land purchase here before council today is we think it's crucial to the development of our industrial park. And I'll start by saying most people I run into when they understand how the tax works for the city of Oregon, how we get our money, they believe, hey, I pay my taxes. I pay a lot of property tax. Well, the true essence of property tax is the city of Oregon gets approximately 4.5% of your property tax, which if you're paying between $3,000 and $4,000 a year, we get between $100 and $200 a year from that. And you'll see that doesn't even pay for your garbage pickup. And we have a lot of other city services, police, fire, we plow your roads, we have the recreation, we subsidize the senior center. We repair the roads, we resurface the roads, we repair the sewers. We have a lot of city services. So where does that money come from? And it comes from the payroll, 2.25% payroll income tax. So the real essence of the lifeline of the city of Oregon's money comes from the working folks that work within the city of Oregon, or if they work in some other political subdivision that pays less than 2.25%, we get the difference that comes to the city of Oregon. So in the changing times, we are known as an industrial-based city. We have a real difficult time doing retail business here because of the number of people that are living within a 3 to 5, excuse me, 3 to 5 mile radius of our business district. It makes it very tough. We found that in our town center, it's really tough to attract retail business. We want to settle for a really quality development. So we have to be patient. So refineries are changing, and we strongly depend on our refineries for income. They're some of our biggest employers within the city, and a lot of our 2.25 payroll lifeline comes from them. With the change in times, we want to be ahead of that. We want to develop our industrial park before refineries change. Maybe they produce less money to us. I hope they survive, but we want to keep our industrial area vibrant, alive, and changing with the times. Our industrial development really started some 40 plus years ago when we had a hard time even doing industrial here in the city other than the refineries because we were hand-tied with railroad crossings. So many of you, probably all of you, have at one time gone over the Millard Avenue overpass. That was approximately 35 years in development. Our Navarre Avenue overpass, 20 plus years. Our Seaman Road overpass, 20 plus years, just to get them so we weren't held hostage to rail traffic. So now that we can get in and out without commerce stopping at our rail crossings, we became a viable site for people to consider to come here. And we want to take advantage of that. Those rail crossings, the 3 of them, probably total cost nearly $100 million. So that was a big investment. A lot of that money was provided by the state, some by the county, some by the city of Oregon. Nevertheless, huge investment. And with the outcome would be what we could generate in our industrial area and not hold people hostage that were living here or passing through, but we really had hurdles. We have eliminated those hurdles. We started acquiring either property in our industrial area or we got options for the property. When we first built Cedar Point Industrial Park, which runs off Corduroy Road and Blue Heron Drive, we have a couple businesses there. The first thing we learned, we do not have big enough lots. We do not have enough property for most of the ventures that come here. So assembling property, and the larger the lot, the more attractive you look. We now have most of the properties options are purchased between Lollendorf and Wynn Road, with this purchase being the final piece of the puzzle that we have to be attractive to big industrial ventures. We really look towards the big industrial ventures because big industrial ventures have more capital, they have more abilities to buffer, they have more abilities to do things to make it as good as possible. We rezoned most of that area to advanced manufacturing, which becomes as aesthetically pleasing as industrial ventures can be. So we've taken a lot of steps. We've taken a lot of time. I said it started 40 plus years ago. And this is the final crucial piece. And we really put a black mark on the industrial ventures that are looking at us if they don't see the support, not only from the city, from this council, and from this community. There's no lot that's perfect in the city. All have little things, but for the good of the city, we believe this is not only essential, but crucially essential. to the future of the city of Oregon. And with that, it's yours.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Any other members of the administration want to add anything before we open up for comment?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mazur.
I think the mayor articulated some of the points about protecting our already existing investments and also avoiding the risk of allowing this property to, by not controlling it, allowing it to go into the market and then thus putting the whole industrial park at risk. What I did want to bring up is that Oregon isn't the only community to do something like this. This happens, actually, it's quite common. A lot of communities buy properties and acquire properties for industrial use. Just to name a few sites that people are familiar with and communities that do this, the Southwick Mall site, the city of Toledo purchased that, and look what that turned into. And mind you, that took over a decade to develop that. Rossford with the Crossroads, the Northtown Mall, and I think we see the results of that. Again, another project that took over a decade. You see the Woodville Mall site, Northwood. Again, that took a very long time to develop. Napoleon, Defiance, Van Wert, Lipsick, all these communities are doing very similar things. And these things do take time to develop. So it takes a lot of patience and it is, but it's in the long run for all of those communities. They are all now celebrating the successes that those projects have become in their communities. And they are realizing not only the income tax revenue from that for the cities, but it's the school systems that benefit huge from this. It's the small businesses that benefit from this, from all of the people that come in, that work there. It's the bankers get loans from people moving in. The builders build new houses. The people that work at dealerships are buying cars. The restaurants are benefiting. All the retailers are benefiting from it. So there are a lot of benefits to, and this is a strategy that's been in the works for over a decade here, for probably over 2 decades here. So this is a great investment, and this is a continuation of that investment. So this is just the next step. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Go ahead, Mayor.
my line of thoughts, I got thousands of thoughts go through my head. I left 2 things out. Question was raised the last week that we purchasing this property without an appraisal. An appraisal is really irrelevant here. Final piece of the puzzle. The property owners started out at $75,000. We worked hard as diligently as we could to come up with the best deal that we could get. $56,000 an acre is what approximately this purchase is. I don't care if the property was appraised at $1,000 an acre. If the owner wasn't willing to sell at that, something that we drastically needed, we did the best we could to negotiate this deal. I've seen people post surveys on the internet talking about our town center, what people would actually want in our town center. And I remember, and Mr. Reeves, I remember when you first became a councilman, you said, yeah, I want to bring restaurants to the city of Oregon. And I hope you know how, because we haven't been able to figure it out. We did learn over years and years that crazy politicians can't bring restaurants here. The market drives that. The people have to know that they have to be able to sell their product and make a profit to pay for their building, their overhead, whatever, to bring their retail business here. And he quickly found that out. But when people ask, you say, what would you want? Well, there's a lot of things I want too, but the reality is we get what our market will bear. If we develop our industrial area and draw in 1,000 or more jobs, and that means 1,000 other people are attracted to this site, we get national recognition for the type of things we have. We are more attractive to some of those things that people really would like to see here. And we have a better shot at getting that. There's a price to pay with everything. Of course, I hear a lot of people complain about things. I hear most of them. I'm the blunt of most of them. We get everything they want in the retail area. I'm sure we're gonna get complaints about how did you let the traffic get so bad? So I'm the bearer of bad news to a lot of people a lot of times. I've been accused of being lack transparency. They're gonna accuse me of a lot of things. That's not it. I'm very to the point. I'm very blunt, probably too blunt sometimes, but I'm upfront, very direct, very honest, and it's reality. Now I rest.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Any other members of the administration wanting to weigh in as part of the presentation of item 57? All right, hearing none, we'll switch kind of our efforts and time into this one here, and we will start calling the individuals to speak this evening. So the first would be Dawn Kristen. You'd come up, say your name and your address for the record, please.
Good evening, Dawn Kristen. I'm actually a resident of Sylvania, Ohio, but I'm here on behalf of my client, the Northwest Ohio Building Trades Council. Mayor Safarian, Council President Horniak, members of council and administration, thank you for letting me speak to you tonight and to share our position in regard to this development. I'm happy to be here tonight on behalf of the Northwest Ohio Building Trades Council. I think most of you are probably familiar with who the Northwest Building Trades Council is, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least spell out a few things. So the Building Trades Council represents over 14 international unions. Amongst those 14 international unions that are located within Northwest Ohio, we represent over 17,000 working men and women, as well as their families that live and work and reside within Oregon and the Northwest Ohio community. Many of the people that I represent are here tonight with me. I think probably half this room is filled with workers who are part of the Building Trades Council. On behalf of the Building Trades and its affiliates and members, we're here in support of the city's efforts to bring development to the city of Oregon. And I implore each one of you council members to approve the purchase of the property to cement the city's efforts to bring this industrial development here. The city of Oregon, its residents, and the greater Northwest Ohio region will greatly benefit from the development and the creation of jobs and increase to its tax base. Many of the comments tonight I have probably echo what the mayor and administrator have already spoken to you about. Oregon has been a leader in our region for industrial development, and quite frankly, you're a prime location for it. You have the transportation infrastructure, we have rail, we have water, we have air, and you also have the roads. More importantly, this development will bring good paying jobs, temporary and permanent, to the 17,000 workers that I am proud to represent. These are men and women who send their children to your schools, who spend their money within the Oregon community. They shop and support your local businesses. Responsible development is the lifeblood of the Northwest Ohio Building Trades Council and the men and women that we represent. We are always working ourselves out of the next job, out of our jobs into the next job. And we hope that this development will bring us that next job. Oregon has been a leader in looking to the future to ensure that it can provide a sustainable future for its residents. On behalf of the trades, I ask each of you to continue Oregon's trend of attracting modern industrial development that brings great opportunities to the city of Oregon and our region. And I ask that you each vote in favor of the purchase of the property necessary for this industrial development. This property is already zoned industrial. The master plan has called for industrial development of this land. The city has already invested in the infrastructure to support this industrial development. Failure to have one owner controlling the site puts industrial development at risk. It makes it less attractive to someone looking to move here. The city has already, and it puts at risk, quite frankly, the jobs that will be supported by this development. I appreciate your consideration and your anticipated desire to seek economic industrial development that maintains the quality of life which our members and your residents have grown accustomed to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next person I'll call forward is Vicki Laurel. And again, Vicki, we'll just ask you to state your name and your address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and staff. My name is Vicki Laurel, and I live at 3516 Fieldbrook Lane. I have been an Oregon resident for 60 years. I have spent 50 years working in this great city, starting as a seasonal worker at the Oregon Recreation Department, and then working in administration at the Oregon City Schools. The majority of my work has been spent working with the children and parents of this community. I am a retiree, and I'm blessed to have all my children and 8 grandchildren who reside in this community and work within this community and also in the Toledo area. I have a very vested and personal stake regarding Oregon's quality of life issues that are influenced by land use and community design issues. The request from this administration to spend over $2.5 million of taxpayer money for questioned land value and keeping the citizens in the dark regarding the potential industrial use and the quality that it would get and the air quality and other industrial issues that come with it is wrong. My request is simple. Stop playing the game. Just say no to incentives and non-disclosure agreements that purposely keep our citizens in the dark. Large companies know where they want to go to begin with and are out to win at all costs. They can set up fake competitions, clauses, and non-disclosure agreements to game the process and extract incentives. Government and community administration, politicians, and economic development teams sometimes play their game to the hilt, and even when they know it is bad policy, to make themselves look good and advance their own positions. It is time for everyone to stop vying for the trophy and start being a conscientious public servant. Each and every one of you needs to determine the right thing to do for the citizens of this community when it comes to serving the public. To help determine what one ought to do, go to the root and the matter and think in terms of your own core values and also the values for your families. It is time to put aside your petty differences and stop the culture of self-interest over public interest. Question whether there are abuses of authority occurring and take steps to self-correct them. Every administrator, politician, and foundation staff owes that to the community they represent. Start engaging in public decision-making and include not just the hand-picked public who will back the administration's decisions, but include the people who offer opposite views and the ability to be fair-minded and not have preconceived agendas and attitudes. Ask yourself the hard and difficult questions. How do we regain the public's trust? How do we look out for the self-interest of our residents regarding their general health, safety, and welfare? Are our residents happy with the belief that, and I quote, Oregon does industry well? Do our residents want to actively continue on this path, or do we want to create new strategies that allow us to say Oregon does culture, health, safety, retail, and livability well? Can we still attract jobs and tax income from infrastructure by developing Navarre Avenue, cultural or recreational facilities? I am all in support of having our unions and our people have jobs, but maybe possibly it's not just for industry. What else can we do besides working to attract industry and manufacturing to make Oregon an up-and-coming area that meets the needs for young families and encourages them to move here? How do we start advocating and supporting a strong community information structure and become transparent to our citizens? Don't our citizens deserve to know who the industrial stakeholders are and their business plans? Do we at least deserve to know what their business plans are before a potential city tax purchase of over $2.5 million? In closing, economic vitality, environmental health, and quality of life are all influenced by land use. I respectfully request a no vote due to the lack of transparency and unknown environmental impact on this issue and this purchase. Stop playing the game and take no action until there is an opportunity to enlighten the citizens on this purchase, so our citizens have an opportunity to ensure that this purchase is not for self-interest, but is in the best interest of our community. Now is the time to build something that makes people want to live here, not pack up and leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Laurel.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
just a quick response. And yeah, I heard everything you said. And I will say, and look directly at you and say that everything you said about looking out for the public interest, not self-interest for me, I believe in this project. I believe in this purchase. Now, we do have a couple of interested parties that have big industrial ventures. But I would support this if they didn't exist, because we would be looking for the future for that. And I believe I've been doing this for 35 years and I don't work it as a job. I live every minute of it. I wake up with it. I go to sleep with it. I live and I feel everything you said, I agree with. And I believe I did it, and anybody who voted for this would be doing it for the best public interest of this entire community.
Thank you, Mayor. Next person I have is Ron Rothenbuehler. Ron, if you come forward, state your name and your address for the record, please.
Yeah, my name is Ron Rothenbuehler. I live at 5712 Eagles Landing Drive, Oregon, Ohio, 43616. I think that's the right zip too. One thing I want to say is it's really hard to follow what our mayor, Safarian, and what the president of our council and what our administrator is saying in regard to how we need to look to the future. I'm 76 years old, and I've lived out here the majority of my life, and I've spent the majority of my life representing working men and women, not only just in the building trades, but in other union positions, from the AFL-CIO to the port council, to dock workers, to the railroads. I still sit on the port council, and I represent those workers because they know that we are a place that cares about working class people. And I know that we all here
Mr. Rothenbuehler.
care about working.
Can I ask you to lean forward just a little bit so the
Oh.
microphone catches you a little
My
bit
wife
better?
says I talk too loud, sorry.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. But in the meantime, the reason I'm here is because I support the sale of this property to our city for future development. Not everything happens overnight. And I don't want to beleaguer this meeting because I know there's a lot of people have things to say. But I am looking forward to a vote of yes from all of our council people, so we can show the working class people and their families that maybe want to come here, probably will come here, because they're only going to go so far west. They're going to have to start coming east. And you know what? Here we are. And I think we're waiting for them. I look forward to your vote, and I certainly look forward to your support in regard to our families and my place of living for the majority of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rothenbuehler. Next, we have Brenda Gift. And again, Brenda, if you just state your name and your address for the record for me, please.
Hi, my name is Brenda Gift. My address is 490 North Wind Road, Oregon, Ohio, 43616. I'm going to start with, this is not personal, it's professional. I oppose using taxpayer dollars to purchase the parcel. There's no clear public benefit. That property has been sitting since 2015 and hasn't sold. There's no good justification for paying over value. I've looked at some real comps and avoiding appraisal. The lot across the street is about 800,000 less for comparable acres, and most properties on the private market are sitting out there 500 to 600 days. We're not at risk of losing something that's going to make us purchase it like right now. Yeah, I know that one's industrial and there's a little road back there, but I've seen y'all flip the switch and change zoning despite what the citizens want. So that's not really an argument for me. This purchase is fiscally irresponsible and it's bad business. Members of City Council, you are the stewards of our city's funds and carry the burden to benefit all of the cities of Oregon. We don't want yes men and women. It's time to exercise your no vote. I would also be remiss if I didn't recognize all the members of the IBEW here. I see you guys here. The state of Ohio has some of the highest standards for electricians thanks to this organization, and they need to be recognized. Now, interestingly, the IBEW knows that you're planning to engage in industry, a $7 billion 7-year project. Why did they know that and the citizens don't? Because last I heard, there was an NDA. You couldn't tell us about smokestacks or about what it was, and y'all shushing each other. And so how did this happen? Because I saw the text. Who invited them to show up tonight? And I'm looking for an answer. The citizens deserve an answer. 2 of the residents who will be negatively impacted are members of the IBEW. More than that are senior citizens. You have minority residents, small children along with, some are kids of the IBEW member, and at least one disabled veteran. That's my husband. He's a Gulf War Bronze Star veteran who's impacted by toxic fumes in the Gulf and burn pits. So what a thrill that you guys are going to build something or considering something to cause more damage. IBEW has a commitment to the community in which their members live to support health, safety, and well-being. Consider that a clean energy or natural gas plant by EPA environmental justice standards is not considered safe within 3 miles of homes. If you look at Ohio's clean energy website, it says they had the full support of the citizens of Oregon, but I know my neighbor Norm wrote to try to stop it. It was too noisy. He was worried about the pollution. The problem is, I want to say they cite teacher training, and I looked at the pictures and there's like 5 teachers in the training. And you know what? None of them are from our area. You talk about local and everything, none of these people, they're from Hancock County, they're from Vermillion, nowhere around here. Why? They didn't have to worry about the truth. Stick the plant in Oregon. In fact, I'd suggest you stick this in Sylvania, but they'd fight it too. It's easy to roll in and advocate for something when you don't live here. Know that what you're doing does not align with what the citizens of Oregon want. If you finish projects that you started, you can guarantee work for years for all the trades. And it's unacceptable that the OEDF cannot find retailers. Getting 16 phone calls in a month and having them result in nothing is a failure, not success. At 152:51 at the last meeting, Alex said, more than one project a month, the schedule is cramped. No, that's the month that you work harder and you don't sleep to make it happen. But as he also stated, the city doesn't have much to offer except a tax break. I can see why you're grabbing at a natural gas plant or other industry. You've got nothing else. And I want you to know that the grants do exist out there. There are a bunch, and some pay up to 75% of project costs. If we were a little more savvy, if we worked a little harder, perhaps we could use that in our favor. We will not be subject to fast and dirty industry because working to attract other businesses is hard. Involve the citizens, make solid decisions. I'll be your biggest cheerleader. Keep us in the dark so you can tank our property values and impact the health of our citizens. And I'll spend my free time researching and sharing what you do to hide from us. Unlike others, I don't see more than one project a month as causing a cramped schedule or too hard. Finally, I love to write letters. I have extensive experience. I have a powerhouse of experts I can consult with, and I know that I will file every complaint and challenge every step of poor financial decisions that are detrimental to our city, a blatant waste of our tax dollar, and any unsafe industry, regardless of the amount of money they think they have or you think you might get. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gift. The last person I have is anybody to address?
Just like to
Go ahead.
say one response. She said be irresponsible to purchase this for this amount of money. I would make the case that it would be irresponsible not to purchase this property when we have so much at risk, the whole industrial park.
Thank you. Next person we have this evening is Jim Ellerbush. Jim, if you come forward, state your name and your address for the record, please.
Thank you, Council President. Jim Ellerbush, 39 Cedarwood Drive, Oregon, Ohio. First thing I would like to do is clarify my remarks of last week. I came before you people and I questioned the price we were paying per acre and whether we had a buyer or not. That's been misconstrued that I am against any projects there. That's totally wrong. I am 100% for manufacturing and heavy industry in that area. I just want to clarify that. Secondly, the law director, I'm going to say advised or cautioned Councilwoman Ackerman to not discuss this, talk about it, or vote on it. I looked into it. The Councilwoman's farms have not farmed that area for 2 years. So I don't see why she has to recuse herself from making comments or voting on this. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Ellerbush. I don't know if we want to comment to that or not. What I will say is this, from time to time, as things come before us as a city and us as a council, there may be individuals sitting on this side of the desk that may have some type of interest in that. Going back to my years on the school board, we had a school board member who had a spouse that worked for the city schools. Sometimes as we would discuss contracts and things of that nature, it was inappropriate for her to vote on that because she was financially impacted by what the decisions would be. So some of what Mr. Ellerbush is speaking about is just some interest in some dialogue that's taken place with this particular agenda item. I believe the individual has had an opportunity to kind of check their resources as far as for what they believe is the right thing to do or how to proceed. And I feel comfortable that I believe we've established that. To your point, Mr. Ellerbush. So thank you. The only other person I had to speak had asked to speak at the end of the meeting. It's nothing to do with the agenda item of 57, but rather to council in general. So we'll defer that person to the end of the meeting. Council, at this point in time, I would ask, does anybody have any questions or comments about item 57 of 2024?
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I have, okay, yes, I am sure, thank you. I have done some extensive research and I've listened to Mrs. Gift extensively, and I wrote down a lot of questions for me to research last week. And what I found through my digging, aside of the master plan from 1996, I also looked through the current master plan that even though people say we don't use it, there are things in there that pertain to industrial. So with 1996, they had said that since its creation of the Oregon Economic Development Foundation, it has consistently created opportunities for the private sector. Among the foundation's successes are the acquisition of 50 acres of industrial land, the establishment of 50 contiguous acres of commercial industrial land, and assistance in securing commitments. They did this back in 1996. Their goal, their strategic goal for this plan, one of them was to provide 200 new jobs, filling by year 2002, the first phase of the Cedar Point development area bounded by Bayshore Road, Wynn Road, York Street, Lallendorf, Norfolk Southern, Otter Creek, and Cedar Point roads in DuPont. The weakness that pointed out to me with this master plan was some homes are still located in the industrial and commercial zone. Back then, in the 1990s, it was the wish of council and the city to grow our industrial base. That was their goal back then. The 2025 master plan that was done in 2005, in their land use, 377 industrial, it states, industrial development is planned to continue in and around the Cedar Point development Park north of Seaman Road and adjacent to Wynn Road to encourage future economic growth, it's recommended that the city track the progress of available land in Cedar Point Development Park. This is something that has been going on for well over 30 years to develop our industrial park. 3 years ago, we had an inquiry that needed a big, huge lot of land. So the mayor went out and looked for land east and eastern part of Oregon. Well, it was all decided, and I agree, we do not need industrial out that way. We need to keep industrial in our industrial park. That's how I feel even today. So when people talk about purchase prices and they say, well, you know, when you go to farmland or residential compared to industrial land for sale, it's apples to oranges. So let's look at industrial to commercial land property. I won't even go up to Navarre Avenue between Coy and I-280. I'll go even farther out. There is a property at 501111 Navarre Avenue at the corner of Wynn and Navarre. That is listed for sale at $695,000 for 8 acres. The price per acre is $86,875 per acre. If you were to go to Parkside Theater is up for sale. That's up for sale for $1,256,250. Now, I don't know if they're going to expand on that or make it something else, but when you divide that by 18.75 acres, you come up with $67,000 per acre. Now, I understand that that's a lot of money and you really can't get, how can you get any appraisals on property when they're not developed on? But when they're zoned, correct me if I'm wrong, Alec, is there a difference between how much residential property is compared to industrial commercial? How much of an uptick is that? If you wanted to buy it for agricultural, that's vacant property. If you wanted to buy it for residential, they make it for people to afford so they can build on it. I understand why the prices are the way they are. And for me, I really do believe that we need to keep moving forward with what our city wanted 30 years ago. And we've been working hard at developing our industrial base. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. Ackerman?
I just want to state for the record that as a member, an elected member of council, I was assigned to the Economic Development Committee of council. I was assigned to the Finance Committee of council. I don't know what any of y'all are talking about. Y'all showed up here because you know about a $7 billion, 7-year project. We were told when we inquired about the information, you know, what is this about? We want to get behind something that's advanced manufacturing because that's what you touted this property as. We would love to have jobs available for our citizens, for the unions. How is it, you ask yourself, how is it that some of you know what we don't know? Why are we kept in the dark? Well, we're told because it's an NDA. Did someone violate an NDA and that's how you all know? Or were you informed? I have every right to ask you. First of all, I want you to understand, I don't know, you don't know, do you know? I mean, we don't know. But you all showed up in favor of a project that you believe exists. So if you know, please share it with those of us that got elected to council because we're in the dark. And so that would be red flag number 1 of why would we support this. So please, if anybody here knows, please share it with your council people. How can we make an informed vote when we don't even know what it is? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. And I will speak to some of what Ms. Ackerman said. A lot of times in economic development, as inquiries and questions come in, it usually comes in a I'll say an anonymous type of method. And some of what Mrs. Pauloff talked about with the idea of the Economic Development Foundation is to have a vehicle in which people can have those conversations without it being with one of us. If somebody reaches out and calls me or sends me an email or a text message, you all have the right to read every word that's in that text message. So contacting an elected official is not usually in a lot of businesses' interests. But I agree. We would like to know more. We would like to know more of what's out there. I think there are avenues you can pursue to ask questions and find information. And I think several council members have done that without saying, I know what it is. I feel better about having an idea of what this might be. But again, it's an opportunity for us. But at this point in time, what I will say for those that don't know, there is a project that is a rather significant project that is looking at Oregon as a potential site. This land would be very important into the development of that project and moving forward with it. There is not a lot of information on exactly what it is, much to Ms. Ackerman's point, which I know for us is a struggle because we sit in the seats that are supposed to be in the know. So when we get asked questions, well, what is it? What's going to be there? What do they have? What are they going to produce? What are they going to provide? How many jobs is it? What's the investment look like? What's the building going to look like? Right now, the answer is we will go according to what our zoning would be, which is advanced manufacturing. There is some that is CI. But at this point, we don't know that information. We are one of a finalist group of this project, and we may not know for another couple of months whether this comes to fruition or not. Regardless whether that project comes to fruition or not, and I'll share my own statement and my own opinions with this, because for those that know me or have talked to me over the last week, I've struggled with this one. This is very difficult for me because I am pro-economic development, but I've also said for years and years and years, economic development doesn't have to mean smokestacks. It's also an idea where it becomes a question of what is the responsible thing to do for our community. As an individual citizen, for those that don't know, I live directly to the south of where this will be. I will see this out my door. When I walk in my front yard, a development on this parcel will be visible. The same as the methanol plant, the same as the refineries, the same as the power plant, the same as many other things that are out there. They're also the same things I see when I drive out Route 20 and I see First Solar and I see all the other developments that are out there. Oregon is uniquely situated and qualified as an industrial community. There's a lot of us that would like to see that pivot just a little bit, and we would like to see more focus into our, I'll say, value of life, quality of life services, items that are out there, the things like the bike paths, the recreations, all those things, good roads, trash pickup, water, those all come at expense. And many, many years ago, people who sat in these chairs before us, the people who took us from a township to a city, the people that started to develop Oregon and put roots in as a city, had the foresight to allow business to come and locate in our community. We're uniquely situated between water, power, natural gas, good roads, rail access. And this is one that I struggle with because I will see it out my front door. So this is where the balance of everybody that sits up there, and I'm not trying to, I'll say, whine anybody, but just so everybody understands, everybody up here signed up for this. We know it. We're big kids, and we will proceed as we feel is responsible and is necessary for us. But every one of us will have to weigh out our individual interests or our individual beliefs into this against what is the right thing to do for our community. And this is one of those opportunities that comes along only once in a while. And while there may have been options on the property available, we have not been able to cobble together enough land that would be a significant opportunity for our city to market to a potential development in that area. The idea of the advanced manufacturing designation was created largely, I was one of the proponents and the strong players in the start of that, because it gave us an opportunity to address the aesthetic and the environmental controls that go with development, whether it be commercial, whether it be industrial, whether it be warehouses, whether it be manufacturing. It gave us an opportunity to create something that didn't look like a factory per se. But the long-term benefits and the long-term opportunities that come from purchasing this property. And I think there are those that still would question, I'll say, the value of the property versus the purchase price. We also live in a world of supply and demand. And the opportunity to purchase this land is there now. It will allow us to cobble together 175 contiguous acres of developable land, which is available no place else in our city. So while I struggled with this for days and days and days, my role as a member of council and my role as a member of this community to look at what is right for the next generations of our community, I do believe that this is the right thing for our city to move forward with. So with that said, I'd ask for anybody else's comments or questions.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. I have a lot of empathy for some of the people, for everyone that has talked tonight. I agree with our council president, Councilwoman Mrs. Pauloff. I don't want to ridicule anybody by saying you didn't do your homework. I have done my homework. I have checked things. I've been in conversations with others. Excuse me. I bought a house on Seaman Road. I don't particularly care for what goes on several times a year across just down the street from my house. But I knew going in that that was going to be there. So shame on me if I did what I did. Just like our property in the industrial area. It cannot, and I'm telling you, it cannot sit vacant. It sits vacant, then we go back to our happy-go-lucky farmers farming it. No disrespect to the farmers. Other things just going on and we go on with our happy little life. Like I said, I will apologize. I have empathy for the people that built out there, but this is I believe, I don't want to say a once in a lifetime thing, but it is very vital to our growth here in the city of Oregon. I can remember living on Coy Road, right across from that medical building that's on Isaac Streets. I could see, when I was a young kid, I could see Cardinal Stritch without ever having to look around a library or anything like that. I could see St. Charles Hospital down right out our front door. I can't even see the old bowling alley now because of the medical building. Growth, it's called suburban sprawl. A lot of people have moved out of areas towards out into Oregon. They want a better life. I'm not going to go rehash everything, but all the city services that we offer, they're offered to us too. I don't want to see smokestacks. That's why we talked about advanced manufacturing. The thing is, the area out there that we are talking about is zoned industrial. I am 65 years old. It's been zoned industrial before I was born. It's going to stay industrial. And like I said, I have empathy for those that built and maybe didn't know exactly what they were building and going to be looking at. But that is our industrial area. And Ms. Pauloff's read it. And I am absolutely, positively, 100% in favor of this ordinance that we're going to bring up tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any additional comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I sit and listen to the residents that have come before us to speak, and like the other council members have said, I do have empathy for the individuals. Each individual has their own idea of what Oregon should be. They have their own personal issues with what we do either today, tomorrow, what we've done in the past. I personally believe it's in the best interest of the city to protect our investment that we've made on the adjacent properties in that industrial park and move forward. We speak about a project that could potentially be here or could potentially come. That project may not come, but the purchase of this property is still in the best interest of the city of Oregon, because I do believe at some point in time, an industrial development will be on that property. And in order for us to moving forward, if a project comes in the near future or not in the near future, it is incumbent upon ourselves to have control of that property so that the people in the economic development arm of the city, the county, the state know that we have control of that property and they can go market it for us for the future. So I do stand before you and say that I am in favor of the purchase of this property to protect the investment that we've already made into this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Council, any other comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
yeah, just, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I know I brought it up last Monday, back with communication, and I understand business-wise, you can't go too far into detail, but I just want to bring it up again for the record. It would be nice to know that something is coming. And like I said, I don't need to know what it is, but it's very embarrassing to be in Kroger or Ralphie's or anywhere and somebody come up and ask you something and you're elected and they look at you like you're crazy. They're like, what do you mean you don't know what's going on? I'm like, I don't know if it's just me or if there's others up here, but that's the only thing I think that would stop a lot of issues. It started with the behavioral place. That'll be next on Coy and Seaman. So it'd just be nice to just put a bug in your ear. Hey, this is a company, blah, 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 and go from there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
Mr. President, I have one quick
Mayor.
thing.
Yes.
I myself do live in Eagles Landing. I'm probably nearly as close to this whole project as President Horniak. Mr. Wallenzeck lives in Eagles Landing. Mr. Reeves is pretty close. So I'll have to pass by it every day, this industrial property. I still think it's a great investment for the city. Will we have to, if something big goes in there, if we're successful, will there be inconveniences? Of course there will be. But once it's done, I think it's something most of the community would be very proud of.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. President.
Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to have to echo the other voices on this end of the table, and that being part of economic funding or the economic committee as well as the finance committee and not having any information on it is extremely bothersome. I don't know if it's an American company that's coming to buy, looking at the land, a foreign company coming in to buy the land. Is it a union company that's going to be coming in, going to be working, building on there? I mean, I don't know the builders, but you know what I mean? But hey, just those things are important to me. And it's not that I would be in any way, shape, or form anti-union, but I'm more concerned about the type of industry, the impacts on the air and water and such around us. If it is a foreign or a U.S. company, those things are important to me. So having information like that would be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salander. Council, any other comments or questions? Hearing no further questions or comments, I will assign item 57 of 2024 as ordinance 57 of 2024, and I'll ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a purchase agreement with Gary A. Jolin and Carol A. Jolin Greenhoff to purchase property located at 0 Corduroy Road, Oregon, Ohio, parcel number 44-10395 in the amount of $2,523,251.36, appropriating funds for said purpose and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of, is it ordinance 55?
57.
Excuse me, for ordinance 57 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, a second by Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Rawson, would you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman?
I abstain.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Pauloff?
Yes.
Mr. Salander?
No.
Thank you, council. Being an emergency, a 5 vote is a requirement on that one to pass, and item ordinance 57 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 5 yeas, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. Next item, I would say for those members, I thank everybody for coming out tonight. Appreciate you being here. I know that that was the main reason. If anybody wants to leave, we'll take a quick recess for 2-3 minutes and reconvene.
I want to see a factory to tell us.
Tell your wife I said hi.
We don't know. We don't
need to
know.
have scotch.
No, we don't know. I know what you said. You
Yeah, we'll
said,
do a
I'll be
quick
set
3-minute
for life
recess.
if it passes. That's
What?
what you said. That is what you said. Do your job. Do your job. This is embarrassing.
Hey.
That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing.
I didn't hear it, but I saw the exchange.
He started yelling at me.
Have a good night.
I didn't,
Just enough for people to-
I didn't know.
Tiffin? Is that what you said, Tiffin? I'm sorry. Oh, it'll be fine. It's still close. Hey, greatest game ever out there. Oh, no. Oh. Soccer. Hey, he'll be fine.
One thing is,
He's doing well with it, though.
one thing is, don't believe
What, 7 billion? Let me ask you a question. No, let me ask you a question first. What do you want?
We're going to reconvene pretty quickly.
Happy farmland?
I would just say to the scouts that are here tonight, you're earning your badge tonight. Getting to see a lot of good activity. Appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate the troop being here.
Whatever.
Council, it does look like everybody's back in, so we'll go ahead and reconvene.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. At this time, we'll move forward with item 58 of 2024, again presented last week. Is there anything further from the administration on 58? Still got nothing? No. 58, nothing to add? Good. All right. Very good. Council, any questions, comments for item 58 of 2024? Hearing none, I will assign item 58 of 2024 as ordinance 58 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into an agreement with West Erie Realty Solutions Limited, 323 Lafayette Street, Toledo, Ohio, to provide professional real estate acquisition services for the LUC SR 221.72 Navarre Avenue Safety Improvement, PID 118234, in an amount not to exceed $148,850 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 58 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Wallensack, seconded by Mr. Drake for ordinance 58 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallensack,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Ms. Paula,
yes,
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 58 of 2024 passes with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moves into the new items this evening, which we've already added. The first item is item 59 of 2024, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien. We're going to start with the chief.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance here is to allow the fire department to submit an application to FEMA for what they call the SAFER grant, which would be the funding for staffing for adequate fire and emergency response. So it's a grant for personnel.
Thank you, chief. Council, any questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, is there any idea of the grant amount that we would be seeking?
So what we would be seeking here is for 12 positions. So it could be in the realm of around, it's a 3-year grant. It's no match to it. And it estimates about 1.6 to $1.8 million per year.
Thank you. And Chief, is there any tie to that? If they fund it for 3 years, is there a commitment from the city of Oregon to continue funding at the same level to receive the grant?
Mr. President, Mr. Wallensack, no, there's no continuation of the grant. If the funding does run out and then there's no, like, if there was a potential of, say, layoffs or the removal of those positions of so on and so forth, there is no requirement by the grant, at least in the confines of the grant, that you must keep it there.
Obviously, we'd like to continue to
Sure.
provide that service, but sometimes there are some ties to the money that you seek, that they require you to continue the staffing levels or pay back some of those funds.
Yeah, and that's just with the changes over the years with this specific grant. So when this specific grant was first established, they did actually have those types of ties. It also before did have a match, and currently now it does not. So it no longer does have a match, and it's a 3-year grant instead of where it used to be a 5-year grant that would step the amounts difference each year. Now it's just one set amount each year, and then essentially, like, if we remember how the ARPA funds were, and you expense those ARPA funds, just the way that we would expense those would be kind of very similar to this.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Council, any additional questions? Chief, I have just one question with this and didn't get a chance to dig deeply into the details of this. The funding, the potential funding that we could get from application for this particular grant into the 3-year period, this somewhat supplements our cost to operate over those 3 years, in which time then the city brings on the full amount, assuming that there's no extension of the program past the 3 years. So it offers some relief for the 3-year period.
That is correct. It provides the full funding for all the positions that are that we apply for. So essentially, FEMA has established a certain amount within the budget each year, which this year was allotted $360 million. They did just recently have a cut to that, about 10%. So that funding amount got reduced by 36 million. But that money then goes out to each organization that's awarded, and it pays the full amount for that staffing for a 3-year period.
Very good. Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Council, any additional questions? Hearing none. We will go forward. We'll assign item 59 of 2024 as ordinance 59 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the fire department to submit an application with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, for funding for the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response SAFER Grant and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Polliff.
I move for passage of ordinance 59 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Polliff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Polliff, a second by Mr. Wallenczak for ordinance 59 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 59 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item on the agenda is item 60 of 2024. And with this one, we'll go to our law director, Melissa Purpura.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to enter into an agreement with Archer Energy to act as the city's natural gas aggregation supplier. It's for a 20-month period beginning October of 2024 to May 2026. As council recalls, the city of Oregon has been a charter member of the Northwest Ohio Aggregation Coalition, also called NOAC. It was formed in 2003 when Ohio passed some legislation that allowed aggregation by governments of gas and electric purchases. The basis of allowing this through the Ohio legislation was try to save consumers costs in their bills for both gas and electric. Most of the communities in Lucas County joined NOAC. NOAC has saved residents and small businesses in Northwest Ohio millions of dollars in their natural gas bills. On a yearly basis, NOAC will evaluate and make recommendations as to whether communities should enter into these agreements with managed programs. NOAC, through Palmer Energy, who is our consultant, solicited 14 proposals for supply of natural gas. At least 2 proposals were received. Palmer Energy is recommending that we go forward with the proposal of Archer Energy. And this, again, would be for a 20-month period. It would begin in October 2024 and end in May of 2026. I will note that our current, we are currently under an agreement with Constellation that ends in May. We will then transition to Columbia Gas. And should council choose to pass this ordinance to allow the city to enter into this agreement, we would then enter into the agreement with Archer in October. So what does that mean to the residents? It means the residents do nothing. If they want to participate in the savings, this agreement allows them to do so. They will many times get calls from other energy suppliers or gas suppliers, and it appears that they will save money based on our research and Palmer's consultation. We have the best proposal in front of us that will save our residents the most money. So again, if council chooses to allow the city to enter into this, the recommendation would be residents just do nothing. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Council, any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Ms. Purpura, what happens or how does a citizen get out of a bad deal that they think that is a good deal? Because I've had several people that have gone to something else and then it's not all what it's cracked up to be. And then what is the process of trying to get out of that agreement with and whatever company it is?
Mr. President, Mr. Reeves, they would have to look at the terms of the agreement that they entered into. And generally, there is going to be a clause that indicates how they can exit out of that agreement. So they're going to need to look at the contract in which they signed.
I know, Mr. President.
Please, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you. I brought a guy here about 2 weeks ago that was having an issue. And he was so happy that he couldn't get, he kept calling, trying to get out of it, but bringing him here to the city because I had talked to Mayor Safarian about that, because I know we have the same issues with several citizens throughout the year, and somehow or another, I think it was, Ms. Wolf, took care of them.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mayor.
and to Councilman Reeves and anybody else that may have that question raised to them, our staff, Sandy Garbrick and Kelly Wolf, both usually will help the people through it. And it happens quite frequently. And they're pretty good at getting the people to their desire of getting out of the contract. So
Very good.
they come here and
Well, I just,
we will help them.
Mr. President.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to put it out there just in case somebody's listening tonight or somebody in the audience here.
We can really get them to listen to do nothing.
Right.
We haven't seen anybody, we haven't seen anybody save money with any of the stunts that are out there.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Polliff.
thank you. I went into Walmart and I was approached by one of those tables. This woman came up to me and said, "Hey, I can get you a lower rate on your gas." And I said, "No, you can't. We have an aggregate through our city." She goes, "There's no such thing." And I thought, if she's saying that to me, she's saying it to everybody. Is there any way that we can have this change on a water bill so everyone knows that they do nothing, but this is who now is the supplier for natural gas? Is that possible?
Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Mr. Mayor, go right ahead.
As odd as it may sound, sometimes that prompts more problems. And so we'll deal with it. We hope the press will pick this up and say, do nothing, and you'll be good. If you're find yourself caught in a bad deal, we'll try to help you out. We'd like to
very well.
stand with that and
Good, because this woman was really pushy and I looked at her and I said no, wasn't that good enough? And so I just kept walking. So.
you
But if
just
she's saying
weren't
that-
convincing.
But if there's, well, yeah, and if she's saying that to me and I tell her what I know, what about people who don't know? So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking the same, but I also know it's sometimes hard to explain all that on the space that we would have into the water bill. And when this was being presented, I did ask the administration to make sure we talked about that. I guess just to clarify, the best deal for every resident in Oregon is to do nothing. The people that come knocking at your door are not going to be a better deal overall. We've been in this program several years. Obviously, we're utilizing a different carrier, a different partner with this moving forward. But the research has been done to make sure that we get the best ones. So, I just reiterate, the best thing for all of our residents to enjoy the best rate possible in this is to do nothing. If somebody knocks on your door asking you to participate in a program that can save you money, ask a lot of questions, verify a lot of information, and don't sign anything. Feel free to call one of us, call any member of the city. We deal with this many times throughout the course of the year where somebody signs into something they thought was the city program. Ms. Paul, to your point, there's a lot of them that will represent that on the porches. This is the discount program for your community. It's not necessarily the city endorsed program. So again, the best I can say, and I'm sure the story for the press coming out of tonight won't probably be this, but
Be the headline.
could be. Clerk of Council, Rawson and I, we just had a brief discussion, is we will work with the administration potentially in trying to put out a press release so that maybe we can get this covered into the Metro press, which can help maybe educate and keep people from that potential negative interaction with that situation. So appreciate the comment to that.
Last thing I'd like to
Sure.
say is,
Last thing for the
is-
night or just for this?
no.
All right, just checking.
The companies that give out the free $100 gift card,
Oh, yeah,
everyone we seen get that does pay it back with huge interest.
very true.
Mr.
Council-
President.
Mr. Salander,
Thank
please.
you, Mr. President. So to clarify then, what you're saying is that the city recommends we should do nothing?
That is absolutely
In essence,
correct.
All right, just want to
Yes.
clarify that. Thank you.
And I would say for those that, are actively into social media and things, might be good to say the best deal is to do nothing. Now, we're going to say there can't be a better deal.
In a different.
Yeah,
role,
if they're
but
in a
not
different
our
role and
thing,
they're
we
enjoying
won't
something
get
that
into
works for them, then that's fine. Everybody sooner gets to make that. But just knowing that all of us up here at some point in time, I've had a phone call about, I just signed with this company. I just got my first or my second bill and oh my gosh, I'm not saving money. It's costing me, $50, $100 more than my typical monthly bill would be. And then we start to try to help to facilitate getting them out of that contract. So we'd rather just avoid them getting in. So yes, the best bet is to do nothing. So thank you, Mr. Salander. Anybody else, council? Hearing no further questions, I will assign item 60 of 2024 as ordinance 60 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and director of finance to enter into an agreement with Archer Energy to act as the city's natural gas aggregation supplier for a 20-month period beginning October of 2024 to May of 2026 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 60 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Second. Second by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Pauloff, a second by Mr. Wallenczak for ordinance 60 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, would you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Salander?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 60 of 2024 passes with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Last item on our agenda for this evening is item 61 of 2024, and for this, we'll go over to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to proceed with the 2024 road program. Henry Bergman was the lowest and best bid for projects 1, 2, and 5. Ebony Construction was the lowest and best bid for project 3, and Gio Grotto was the lowest and best bid for project 4. All of the project descriptions, costs, recommended contractors are all in the exhibit. And I'd like you to turn to the second page. It's just past Mr. Schultz's memo to council. And one thing in his memo, I want to point out that all of these, the funds covering these projects were included in the 24 budget. And in some cases, if it's a water project, it comes out of water funds. Otherwise, it's either the REC or the general fund for the road program. But if you look at the second page, it gives a summary. And project 1 and 2 are your traditional, more of your residential street paving projects. Those are both recommended for Henry Bergman. Project 1 is several streets off of Star Avenue, Belden, Bleecker, Mountain Brook, Olivewood. Patchen is north of Pickle. And then DuPont Road between Bayshore and the city's wastewater treatment plant. It is strictly an industrial road. Our recommendation is to go to a chip and seal with what's called a fog seal. It goes on top. It'll look just like an asphalt road, but very effective in preserving the life of these roads. And project 3 is recommended to Ebony Construction. This is really just old water line repairs. It eventually will repave Navarre Avenue for a full, true replacement. A lot of times you go through urban paving grants to get that. But until that happens, you do have to actually redo some of these patch jobs. So that's what that contract's for. We'll use the purchase order for Ebony since it is under 25,000. So that's why it's not listed in the ordinance. And then project 4 and 5 are for the pickleball courts. And project 4 is with Gio Grotto. They're already working out back on the wetlands. And so it's ideal for the contractor that's already on site to give a lower bid when it comes to this work. Their contracted work would be just the earthwork, drainage, and then they'll provide millings for a parking area around that area. They also prep the aggregate base for the pickleball courts itself. And then project 5, we're recommending to Henry W. Bergman for the actual asphalt coating. Rodney is working on costs for fencing and lighting and the final sealing of the courts. And they'll likely come by way of ordinance unless there's something lower than 25,000, but I'm not too sure of that. So, but those are our projects. And then I also wanted to note that as much as we do our road program every year, it can vary from anywhere from 300,000 to 900,000 is what we normally put in our road program. This listing seems light, but just keep in mind, Ember Drive is a project we awarded last year. It was to be constructed this year. That's a $308,000. Coy Road is another very large project. There's actually several sections of Coy, not through the brand new intersection of R and Coy, but at other areas from Flights all the way up to Seaman. We did receive a grant for that, $500,000. And then also Corduroy and Wynn Road resurfacing. That is from Cedar Point to Corduroy, and then on Corduroy from Wynn to Stadium. We also received $500,000 grant for that project as well. But overall, when you look at our road program plus those projects, we're looking at 3.2 million going into roads, and that's quite a bit for a city our size. But these have been planned projects. We did get grant dollars to pay for this, and everything has been accounted for in the budget to pay for this. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. And I would just echo council before I open to questions. When Mr. Roman had contacted me last week and said basically our timing on this was running a little ahead of schedule, which is why we are seeing it tonight being, as they call it, walked onto the agenda as opposed to coming through a committee of the whole. These projects were talked about and vetted through the budget process. So this just allows us to get moving on the projects a little bit quicker. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you, Mr. Roman, for staying on top of that. So council, any questions on item 61? Hearing none, I will assign item 61 of 2024 as ordinance 61 of 2024. And I will ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Accepting the bids of Henry W. Bergman, Inc., 218 East 9th Street, Genoa, Ohio, for Project 1, Project 2, and Project 5, and Geo Grotto Company, 3135 Front Street, Toledo, Ohio, for Project 4, for furnishing labor, materials, and equipment for the 2024 Roadway Improvement Program, authorizing the Mayor, Director of Public Service, and Finance Director to enter into a contract with said contractors and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Paulo.
I move for passage of ordinance 61 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Paulo.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Reeves. We have a motion by Mrs. Paulo, a second by Mr. Reeves for ordinance 61 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Salander?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 61 of 2024 does pass. Thank you. With a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. That concludes all the agenda items we have for this evening. Council, we did have one individual who did sign in to speak, who asked to speak at the end of the meeting so as not to defray from the conversation about the purchase of the land this evening. So at this time, I'd make available to PJ Caphammer to come forward and speak. And PJ, we'll just have you say your name and your address for the record, please.
PJ Caphammer, 3646 Navarre Avenue. Was pretty clear what I want to talk about before I came in here. And then it got a little more confusing. Then it got really confusing. So during that whole conversation, that's why I didn't want to talk about this during that conversation, not to sidetrack it. But during the conversation, there was a member who appeared to have a conflict of interest last week. And then somebody in the audience said they no longer have that conflict of interest and they no longer farm it. And so I thought, well, that makes more sense then. And then you had a member abstain, which usually means there's a conflict of interest. That's why you're abstaining from the vote. If all that's true, there's multiple things from last week's meeting that as a public official crossed some lines that isn't healthy for council as a whole.
Mr. President, can you speak up? Because I can't hear you very well.
Leaning forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys need to pull it. The first thing from last week's meeting, when I transcribed the meeting, the first thing was when we entered into the conversation about the injured firefighter and more importantly, workman's comp. Not only are you protected with HIPAA, but you have state and local. You also have a collective bargaining agreement with your union employees. As a previously elected official, that was pretty much instantly something you knew. You could, even though you'd like to sometimes, you can't discuss anything with people calling off, sick, injured, anything, especially with your employees. So that was the first thing. I'm like, ooh,
that's not real good to do, especially when you have to deal with your union and your employees. That was the first part of the meeting where I thought, well, you probably want to cover that a little bit better so it doesn't come up in the future, so you don't have issues with employees. And more importantly, breaking rules that are set to protect them and their work environment for you. That was the first one. I'm completely lost because until we had the abstain, which wasn't clarified why they abstained, but when you abstain from a vote, it's usually a conflict of interest that keeps you from voting. But if that's true, that conflict of interest also keeps you from speaking on the whole subject. So I'm really lost, like, I don't know. If there is a conflict of interest, and I will find out because I made a public information request earlier today, but if there is a conflict of interest and you're even entering the discussion, you jeopardize everything by doing that. If you're talking to other elected officials, you're jeopardizing that vote. Everything you do moving forward with a conflict of interest jeopardizes and muddies the water. We, in last week's vote, get 3 point of orders. 3 times, and they defined what they thought, what rules were being broken, and that was just the basis of a point of order. But then there was no ruling on the point of order, which is confusing. Because when you make a point of order, the whole meeting should stop. All discussion for everything should stop on a point of order. Then you tell them what rule is being broken, and the chair or the person in charge of the meeting now has to decide if that point of order violated a rule, and then you have to control moving forward, which we didn't. So last week, there was at least 10 statements. Well, I mean, just the first thing. You guys all know I have 3 issues that I would like to respond regarding this. I have to, and that's when you cut it off the first time. You shouldn't know any issues if there's a conflict of interest. That's a violation in itself if you know the problems, because that means you're discussing part of the problems on a conflict of interest that you shouldn't be doing. So that was the first one. And then the member said, we farmed it for decades, and I can't have an opinion as to whether we can spend money on that. That's the conflict of interest. If you have financial interest in that property, that is your conflict of interest. So, but then the discussion kept going. And you have multiple point of orders. You have your city administrator bring up the point of order. And then you have your law director as counsel for, I assume, acting as counsel for city council, entering into it to explain why it should stop. And then it didn't stop. And then we kept talking about multiple things about not going to vote, but the conflict of interest keeps you from discussing it. It actually keeps you from discussing individually with other people. I got out of politics because the rules in politics suck, but you're held to a higher standard. We even had a member was discussing this, saying, as a private citizen, you're no longer a private citizen. You don't get to play that game. You're acting for the whole city. Every one of you are acting and representing the whole city. You don't get to be a private citizen no more. That's what really, and I feel you guys' pain. Mr. Drake, exactly. I wish I knew. I wish you could tell me. I wish there's things. Business sometimes does that. In schools, we would go to executive session. You don't have that opportunity, and that's really hard. But we would never be allowed to talk about a business coming in, buying something, purchasing something. We couldn't talk about it because it was protected. Businesses are really crafty, and that's just the world you're in right now. They're going to protect their interests, especially if you're talking about a multi-million, billion-dollar company, whatever it is. They're going to protect that interest so they can't get destroyed before they can come in and do what they got to do. Your control is zoning. Very smart to drop that from heavy industrial down to what you guys have done in the last couple of years. But that's your only control. And I wish more people understood you don't get to pick your neighbors. You don't get to pick your businesses. Zoning does that. And they can appeal it. They can try to change it, but that's your first control. Everything's going to have to come in front of council, and things are to be done the right way. But there's a process. That's why you don't get to be a private citizen. This process was absolutely destroyed unless there's a conflict of interest, but then I don't understand why there was you abstained from the vote. We did this on the school board too. I had a member with me. His family was in the union. He couldn't be part of any of the conversation. No emails, no nothing. When we negotiated with our teachers, he couldn't even get the emails. Because if we did that and he injected anything into it, fruit from the poisonous tree. That went on all night last night, and there's multiple occurrences, and I'm sure, but it even went on Facebook after that.
Asking for time.
So I'm concerned as this entity as a whole, it's not worth debate. I don't care if someone's right or wrong, but as a whole, you have to be very careful. And point of order means it stops or somebody's leaving the building. Because you can't keep going if you find that point of order to be true. It has to stop immediately. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Mr. President, since
Right.
that's basically directed all at me, even though he was speaking all to you,
Sure.
do I get a chance to explain my abstaining?
Sure.
So you know, since it's of concern to you, last week, first of all, I was in an OEDF meeting when I found out about this. I didn't hear about it from anybody here. I learned it at an OEDF meeting. I really struggled with trying to find out whether or not there was a conflict of interest. The last time that we farmed that property was in fall of '22. I was given advice, different types of advice from different people after spending the day at the Ohio Municipal League training on Saturday, which I thank the administration for sending me to. I learned that it was, some said yes, some said no, and these were law directors from all over. They said, check with the Ohio Ethics Commission. I did, and I apologize if it was just very confusing about whether or not I should have had, is this a conflict of interest or not? But after spending a lot of time with the Ohio Ethics Commission and looking at the Ohio Revised Code and back and forth in legal decisions at the state level, it was determined that we haven't farmed it. We have no financial gain. We don't have any interest in that property. So I can involve myself and I can be concerned. And that's the Ohio Revised Code. So, and as far as, I appreciate, I will learn the order better. I thank you. You're really a role model for me to learn that from. But moving forward, I abstain from the vote because I don't have enough information to make an informed decision. So you're saying I should just, without information, say yes or no, and that would be irresponsible to the citizens that elected me. So, but thank you for your concern about how I conduct myself in this meeting, and I will promise you I'll try to do better.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. And the one thing I would say to that point as well, and this comes on me and my shoulders. When the point of order was called, I believe we tried to stop the conversation at that point, and as subsequents were. Done a lot of learning about points of order over the last 7 days. There is an actual step process to go through, which I was not completely aware of in Robert's rules. 12 years as an elected official, that's the first point of order that's been called in any public meeting that I've sat in. That goes on my lack of experience and knowledge for that exact protocol through Robert's rules for that. We know that now, that there is basically a decision that is made by the chairman of the meeting or the president, if you will, in our case, of either it's well taken or not well taken, which means I support it or I don't support the point of order. There is an appeal process that can be gone through the members. So we now know that process. I think I understand that better and know how to deal with those. Hopefully we don't have more of them coming forward. but if they were. But I appreciate Ms. Ackerman's comments to her reasons for abstention. I won't speak to her reasons or rationale for doing that. But I do say in many cases, as elected officials, there are times where things may have some kind of reference or impact to us individually or a family member or whatever it may be. And I think in most cases, most of us do try to proceed with an abundance of caution, just for any view of impropriety, that we can try to steer clear as best as possible when those things try to come up, or if there's a different reason for abstention. 15 seconds.
This is a perfect example. An educated council, even if it's not personal. Everybody in the room now knows. Point of order, maybe you didn't know before. It can stop a lot going further down the road. So it's a great discussion. It's not mudslinging or anything. If I did, I'd probably have to go at Steve harder than anybody because it's his, Steve runs the room. It's your room.
Yep.
You were elected by these people to represent them and it's your room.
Absolutely.
So, but now it's a perfect example of, even though we might agree to disagree the way I delivered it, the room is more educated about it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Cavanagh. That's all the items we have on our agenda. I do want to thank everybody who joined us this evening, those who spoke, those who didn't. I want to thank our Boy Scout troop that's here. Thank you guys for being out. Very, very good to have you here. Very good to see you guys out and involved. Thank you to the leaders of that group. We know that that's a big commitment and a big investment of your time into these youngsters, and we appreciate what you're doing with that. With that said, absolutely. With that said, we'll move on to the mayor's report. Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I have some appointments to make. These first several are seasonal appointments, and I'll start from water distribution and ask for council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Garrett Anderson of 1646 Sugar Bush to utility worker in the water distribution division, classification 5, step 4, which hourly rate of $19.75 an hour. And the startup date will be effective Tuesday, March 26, 2024, which is tomorrow. And I would ask council's concurrence in that appointment.
Thank you, Mayor. Council? Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to concur with the mayor on the appointment of Mr. Garrett Anderson to utility worker 2.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
We have a second by Mrs. Pauloff. We have a concurrence by Mr. Wallenczak, a second by Mrs. Pauloff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, we welcome Mr. Anderson to the team. Mayor?
And I thank you. And these next 4 individuals will have a startup date of March 26th, which is tomorrow also. And they are all utility worker 2, classification 5. And the first one, David Wiegand of 908 Orchard Drive, Rossford, step 4, $19.75 an hour. James Gorey, 3505 Lynbrook, Oregon, step 4, $19.75 an hour. Chad St. John, 2103 McGinnis, Oregon, step 3, $19.25 an hour. James Crandall, 1121 South Wheeling, Oregon, step 2, $19 an hour. And I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment of those 4 individuals, once again, starting tomorrow, March 26, 2024.
Thank you, Mayor. Council?
Mr. President,
Mrs. Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of David Weigland, James Yorey, Chadwick St. John, and James Crandall to Seasonal Cemetery and Streets Department, effective March 26, 2024.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Reeves. We have a concurrence by Ms. Pauloff, seconded by Mr. Reeves. Council, are there any objections? Thank you, Mayor. Council concurs with the appointment of the 4 individuals to the Cemeteries and Streets Department. Mayor?
And lastly, and this is from the engineering department, and this position, engineer 1 position. And I just want to give some kudos to Mr. Roman, who set up this internship for our engineering department, which gives us time to look at an individual's production. And this one's a real keeper. So Mr. Roman has come forward with William Madubo of 2321 Rock Spring Road, Toledo, Ohio, to the position of Engineer 1 in PSTE pay range 22, step 3, 35.15 an hour, which is an annual rate 73,122.92. The starting date, let's see, would be
May 20th.
May 20th, 2024. And once again, I've had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Madubo here. Real pleasant guy, real bright, real good asset. It's in our engineering department. And through I call it a feeder program that Mr. Roman started out, and a great addition to the city's engineering department. And I would ask council's concurrence, once again, in the appointment of William Madubo.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Pollitt.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of William Madubo to the Department of Public Service effective May 20th, 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Pollitt.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walczak. We have concurrence by Mrs. Pollitt, seconded by Mr. Walczak. Council, any objection? Hearing none, Mayor, the council concurs with the appointment as presented, and we welcome them to the team. Mayor.
With that, I would conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mazer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mazer. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
Just one comment, Mr. President. The mayor mentioned that through our internship program, we've had dozens of kids go through our system. Some have become county engineers, public service directors. And William, it's rare to have an opening and have someone just graduating like William. And so he's done an excellent job as an intern. Very soft-spoken, but he actually has excellent people skills. A lot of people have met him, and I think he'll do really well here. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick note from Mr. Borton on update on the restroom concession stand. He said he sent it out to us, but just since it was asked, I'm going to read it real quick. Just a quick update. As I heard this was requested at Monday's meeting, had a construction meeting yesterday. We are waiting on a few minor punch list items, like some caulk that will have to wait till warmer, touch-up paint, and a few floor tiles fixed in the press box. Other than that, building's ready to go, planning on opening bathrooms next week. As high school games begin, we'll operate concession stand as soon as we get final approval from Health Department that we hope to have by the 1st of April. Just a reminder, ribbon cutting for the press box will be April 22nd at 4 p.m. before Clay varsity softball and baseball games. Concession building grand opening to be announced based on how quick asphalt plant opens and we can have it paved, guessing middle of May. So that's the update from Mr. Borton. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. And for the record, thanks to Mr. Borton for providing the update and information. It'll be exciting to see those facilities opening. Mrs. Pollitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing from my standing committee, but I'm sure the majority of people here celebrate Easter. So I want to wish you all a very happy Easter. And for those who celebrate Ramadan, you're almost there. So thank you. Have a good one.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Pollitt. Mr. Walczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing for my standing committee, but I do want to, I know most of the people that were here left, but I do want to thank everybody for coming out and engaging city council. I remember sitting at this dais when we had one person sitting in the audience, and it's much better to engage. Oh, it was even before you guys. We had one.
It was Ruth.
Yeah.
It was
Yes.
Ruth.
Well, Mary.
Oh,
I was going to say, we affectionately termed her as our eighth council member.
And it is, from a councilman standpoint, it is much better when we have engagement with the public, even if we may be on different sides of the issue. The voice of the people to present that to city council is very important. So again, I would like to extend an offer to the public to continue to engage our city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mrs. Ackerman.
From my standing committee, I want to remind everybody that Tree City USA is coming up, and the deadline to register is April 1st. It will take place on April 17th. We are Tree City USA, but we are not in the upper tier of Tree City USA, so I'm hoping we can rectify that, and I'm hoping some of you join me at that event. There is information online, or I can get it to you if you let me know. And I don't care, I'll pay my own way. That's fine too. And I want to thank, and aside from that, well, this too, please, I got my t-shirt. I hope the public turns out for the observation of the eclipse. And that's coming up, what, April 8th? April 8th? Yeah, that's fast. And I want to thank the administration for sending Steve, and I know Steve feels the same way, to the Ohio Municipal League. It was basically seven classes on our new roles in city government, acknowledging that there's a learning curve for new people. And we had a lot of eye-opening lessons there, but probably a refresher course would be good for everybody too at some point, because this stuff's always changing, or at least sign up for the updates that OML sends out. It was really a insightful day, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Mr. Salander.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report from my sitting committee, but I do want to echo that as well. It was extremely educational. There were some dry parts talking about finance and such, but they did a good job though. And I know I definitely learned a lot throughout the entire thing. So yes, thank you very much for sending us all there, or sending us there. And I would also echo that I think it's something that would be a good refresher, even, as you get on things for a while, you kind of get comfortable, and you forget about, you may forget about things. At least I know I need refreshers. So I think that is pretty much it. I do want to also just thank the public real quick as well, just who are here and who may have left. Thank you very much for coming out. I think also, I will echo Dennis on that as well, that it's so important to have you all involved and participate in this. I know for myself, it helps me know what you're thinking and how you're thinking, because I try to do the best I can to get out there, but this is the best way to get many people at one time. And thank you to the Boy Scouts for attending also. You got yourself a good one. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. Mr. Drake.
No report. I just want to echo what Dennis and Steve said about everybody coming out, especially the Boy Scouts. I know it's probably a long night. Maybe you guys can sleep in tomorrow, have a tummy ache or something. But no, thanks for everybody that came out.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. What I kind of heard there is Mr. Drake may be writing notes tonight if we need notes for late admission tomorrow. Council, I thank you all for your engagement, your discussion this evening. Again, everything that comes before us, some are easier than others, and I do appreciate your involvement, your active engagement in what we do here. Mostly, I thank the people that are here, the people that came here tonight. Active engagement from the public is our best resource and our best tool as a council to make informed and transparent decisions. So I do appreciate everybody being here, and do appreciate the update from Mr. Borton on the facilities out back and other exciting things that are coming into our recreation department. With that, I'll close and I'll seek a motion for adjournment.
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salander. We have a motion to adjourn in a second. Council, any objections? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.